Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. When you are the parent of a child with ADHD and you make the decision to homeschool, it can be a really scary thing. But I want to encourage you today that homeschooling a child with ADHD is, in my opinion, the absolute best option that you can make for your child. A traditional school setting just is not good for a child who has issues with attention and sitting still and those sorts of things. Because if you look at the traditional school setting, kids are expected to sit for 6 to 7 hours a day. They don't get many breaks or get able to move around very much. They have long periods where they just have to learn the same subject or do the same assignment. They don't get many breaks. I know that in my school district, they actually don't even do recess anymore, even with the elementary school. The kids are lucky if they get out maybe once a month in the warmer months, and then they're out for like 10 or 15 minutes and they're back inside. So as scary as homeschooling a child with ADHD might seem, it is so much better for your child. So as the mom of one child who's been diagnosed with ADHD, and actually a few others that I suspect may have it, but that I've never actually had formally assessed, I'm just going to share with you some tips that I've learned throughout my years of homeschooling that have really helped when it comes to this. But the first thing that I really want to point out before I get into this is that there is no perfect way to homeschool any child, not just kids with ADHD, but there's no perfect way to do it. So the tips that I'm going to give to you today may help, but they're not going to be foolproof, and I am not going to guarantee that they're always going to work, but they might actually just give you a little nudge in the right direction. One thing as a parent of a child with ADHD that you have to really get used to is you're gonna have to change things around from time to time, and it might be a fact of life. There are still times where I think that things are going really well, and then all of a sudden 4 weeks later it's not going so well anymore and I have to change things. So with that being said, I will share with you 10 things that have really helped us out. The first thing is to be sure to incorporate your child's interests into what they're learning. And I know that you have probably heard this on other videos, or you've probably read this on other blogs or in books about any homeschooling child. And it's true. I think that you should always incorporate any homeschooled child's interests into what they're learning. But this is especially true when it comes to kids with ADHD, because they really do have a difficult time paying attention, and they have so many issues with attention spans. So if you are actually using something that they are interested in to help them learn about something, they are going to have so much of an easier time to actually absorb things. And when my son, who has ADHD, when he used to be in school, he used to have a learning support teacher. And I remember the one day after school, she came up to me really excitedly, told me that she found something out today. And then she went on and said to me, I realized today that if I give your son something to read about that he's really interested in, then he's able to comprehend it so much better. I gave him a book on skateboarding today and he read it and he was able to comprehend it perfectly. And I remember standing there thinking to myself, this is a breakthrough? This doesn't seem like rocket science. Of course you should give him stuff that he's interested in. But I think that a lot of people, they don't associate school with doing things that kids are interested in. They associate school with things that they think kids have to learn. But you know what? Homeschooling isn't like that. You can incorporate your child's interests, and it will help them to be able to concentrate so much better. So that is the first tip. The second tip is to keep their lessons short. And this is another tip that you have probably heard elsewhere for all homeschooling kids, not just kids with ADHD. I know that it's really big in the Charlotte Mason method is to do short lessons. And I actually do short lessons with all of my kids, not just my kids with ADHD. But again, this is another one that is crucial for them, because as hard as it is for a child without ADHD to sit through a lesson that is 30 to 45 minutes long, it is even 10 times harder for a child who really has a hard time sitting still, not fidgeting, concentrating on things, And you know what? It can be kind of like torture for your kids. So again, in school, the kids, they do have to sit for like 45 to 50-minute periods. You don't have to do that in your homeschool. Keep the lessons at, like, depending on your kid's age. You know, if they're younger, I would say anywhere, if they're really young, I would say even 5 to 10 minutes is a good level for them. When they're a little bit older, you know, like upper elementary school or to middle school, I would say possibly like 10 to 20 minutes. And with high school, I would say about 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, because with some kids, as they get older, their ADHD kind of like slows down a little bit. But all kids are different. But the point is just really try to keep their lessons as short as you can, because it is so much better to have 10 minutes of your child's undivided attention where they're able to actually understand what you're talking about than to make them sit and listen to you or to do some lesson that takes 45 minutes and have them drifting off and having no idea what anything was about. So just keep that in mind. The third tip that I have for you is to take lots of breaks. And I mentioned that earlier with school, you know, there really aren't any breaks. They're kind of there all day long. And the biggest break they might get if they change classes at school maybe might be going from class to class, or maybe going, you know, to their lunch period. But that is the only break that your kids will get in school, generally speaking. In your homeschool, this is one of those things that you really need to take advantage of the freedom that comes with homeschooling. You can take breaks whenever your child needs it, and they really do need that. So what I usually would recommend is to do maybe 1 or 2 subjects and then let them take a break for a while, whether it's going outside to run around or just sit down and draw a picture, or, you know, to play with a toy that they like. It doesn't matter what they're doing, and it doesn't matter how long the break is, as long as you give them a time to have a brain break so that they don't have to completely focus all of their attention on one thing. Just give them a time to breathe a little bit. And I'm telling you, it's also good for the parents as well. So the next tip that I have for you is to incorporate lots of movement and hands-on activities into your homeschool routine. Kids with ADHD, they like to move, and a lot of them learn best while they're moving. You know, I have heard of kids who have learned their addition and multiplication facts while jumping on the trampoline. My son, he really likes to go to the creek and go on hikes and just to do anything outdoors for his science lessons, because really, who says that it has to come off a worksheet or out of a textbook for them to learn something? Kids with ADHD, they're tactile learners. Very often they're tactile learners, which means that they like to do things hands-on. You know, they like to be moving and just doing physical things while they're learning. So really try to get that into your homeschool as much as you can. That the same thing goes with hands-on activities. You know, baking. You could do crafts. If your kids like crafts, they might do those sorts of things. There are so many good experiments right here on YouTube, science experiments, a lot of times even with just things you have from around your house that you could get your kids doing with you. But the point is that you want to try to fit your child's learning style into their homeschool routine. And very often with kids with ADHD, they really do like to learn by actually doing things. The next tip that I have for you actually has to do with the last tip, and that is to take cues from your child. Now, I just got done saying about making sure that you incorporate hands-on activities into your homeschool, but you really need to watch your children as they're doing these activities, because you have to be able to pick up if these activities are not working for your kids. Because just because an activity is hands-on, it doesn't mean that it's foolproof. It doesn't mean that it's absolutely going to work for your child. You know, all kids have different tastes. With my son, after I started homeschooling him for a while, we all started doing lap booking together. And I thought, oh, well, lap booking is going to be great for him because that's lots of hands-on learning, and he'll like to do that. Well, what I didn't realize was that along with his ADHD, he also has a lot of he's a perfectionist. He has a lot of perfectionistic tendencies. And so things that don't really bother other kids really, really bothered him. You know, if he was doing his lap book and his scotch tape got a little wrinkle in it, or if his paper would be glued just slightly bit, off, or if he didn't like the coloring on something, if he thought that he didn't do a perfect job of coloring something, he would not be happy, and this would often lead to meltdowns. So it got to the point where I finally realized that lap booking, just because it was a hands-on activity, was not good for my son. So I had to stop doing those with him, and I had to move on to something else, which I alluded to in the beginning of the video. I said to you that you're going to have to change things out every now and then. And yeah, this was one of those times that I had to change things out. So again, take cues from your child. Really pay attention to them and see if it's actually working. If you see that they're getting overly stressed from it, you don't have to keep doing it with them. Find something else. The next tip that I have for you is to allow fidgeting. Fidgeting is one of those things that in school they don't allow fidgeting because there's 30 other kids in the class and they don't want your child distracting the other kids. But in a homeschool environment, why not? Why not have fidgeting? I know that with my kids, when I'm reading to them, I'll often let them fidget. Sometimes they will have Play-Doh, or other times they'll be playing with little Shopkins, or sometimes I will let them draw as long as they're drawing something that I'm reading about. Fidgeting really, really helps a lot of kids with ADHD because they can concentrate better if they're actually fiddling with something with their hands than if they're spending all their time and their energy trying to sit still and pay attention to you. Now, this actually, I do want to say that this is another thing where you have to take cues from your kids, because some kids, as much as they learn better when they're fidgeting with their hands, or not learn better, can pay better attention to you. Some of them really seem to get so into their fidgeting that they kind of lose track of what you're teaching to them. So for example, I did notice with some of my kids for a while that when I would do read alouds with them, I used to allow fidgeting. But then we got to the point where I would ask them what I had read about, and they could no longer answer me because they had just gotten to this point where they were so into what they were doing with their fidgeting that they tuned everything else out. So that's another thing that you really have to tweak. Find something for your kids to do that is going to help them to pay attention to you, but that is not going to completely absorb them to the point that they, just have no idea what you were talking about. And, chewing gum is really, that's a really great way for your kids to fidget without fidgeting, if you get what I'm saying with that. Because just the act of chewing, they're able to move, they're still doing something, and they're not having to sit completely still. So if all else fails, always keep chewing gum, in hand, on hand. So the next tip that I have for you is to use a flexible but structured routine. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it's really not. Kids who have ADHD oftentimes really do need some sort of a routine. It really helps them to know, at least have an idea of what is going to happen next throughout the day. And I also know that kids with ADHD oftentimes have a lot of issues with organization. They're kind of scattered everywhere. And having a set routine really helps your kids to just hone their organization skills. But where the flexibility part comes in at is that, if your child has ADHD, you have to accept the fact that spontaneous things are going to happen, and that's okay. And that's why I say you want to have, my cat's here with me, you want to have a flexible but structured routine. So have something that your kids know that they can count on every day, but don't freak out if something happens that is going to throw it off a little bit. The next tip that I have for you for homeschooling kids with ADHD is, if you are comfortable with your kids directing their own learning, consider unschooling. It is really a fantastic way for kids with ADHD, especially if they are motivated, if they are curious, and if they are not afraid to go out there and get their hands dirty without people telling them what to do. Unschooling is a fantastic method of learning for kids with ADHD. Now, we did do unschooling in our house for about 2 years, and with our family at least, I noticed that unschooling did not give us the amount of structure that we needed in our house, mainly because we have so many kids. But if it's something that you really are interested in, unschooling is a great idea for a lot of kids with ADHD. So I would really look into it and consider it. I would recommend reading anything by John Holt, especially Learning All the Time. That one's my favorite. Okay, so the next one, now these last 2 tips that I'm going to give to you, I actually published a post on my blog last night giving you 8 tips to homeschooling kids with ADHD. And I actually thought of these 2 after I had already published it. So you're going to get like a little bonus that the people reading my blog did not. So the 9th tip that is not on my blog post is forget about textbooks. I know that this is one of those things that when you think school, you think textbooks, but learning does not have to happen from textbooks. And when it comes to kids with ADHD, that is the last place they're going to learn from. And I've been giving you lots of ideas on things to do to get them to learn better, through hands-on learning, movement, take lots of field trips. Just let them do things, because when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter how your child is learning. It only matters that they're learning. So if your child has a complete aversion to textbooks, don't stress yourself out over it. Because what is the point of making your child sit down and do textbook after textbook after textbook all day long if you know that they're not retaining any of it? It's really a waste of time. And even with my own kids, the only textbook that my son with ADHD, or actually no, he has 2 textbooks that he's using this year. One is Dailygrams. Now he's in 12th grade. One is Dailygrams because it only takes 5 minutes to do that. And his other textbook is Life of Fred Algebra. All the rest of his learning is done, whether it's through videos, living books, being out in the field, doing things. So textbooks are not the only way to learn. I keep saying that, but that's because it's so important to get that into everyone's head, because most of us have grown up thinking that that's the way learning happens, and it's not the only way. In fact, I'd say that's probably the least likely way, but that's another video entirely. So the last tip that I have for you today is don't be afraid to change things up. You are not bound to your curriculum. And this is what I was talking about earlier. When you have a child with ADHD, you're gonna have to change things quite a bit. And as I was saying earlier, there have been times when I thought that my son was doing really well with something, only to find that 4 weeks later it was no longer working and we had to try to figure something else out for him. And that's something else that you really need to remember. You're not bound to your curriculum. There is no such thing as the curriculum police. So they are not going to come knocking at your door if they found out that you stopped using whatever their resource was and went on to something else. This is one of the reasons that I really love the library. I do not go out there and spend thousands of dollars on curriculum. I use the library, not only because it saves me so much money, but because there are so many times that we end up having to change things. So it's not like I wasted all of this money. I didn't. I just go to the library and get something else. So those are the tips that I have for you today on homeschooling a child with ADHD. If you have any questions at all, leave a comment. I will link my blog post in the description box in case you'd like to see that too. But remember, you did get 2 bonus tips. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet and would like to do that, I would be really happy if you would. And I hope you have a great day.